Mother Bear walks into the hospital, carrying a human baby. The nurse breaks down in tears when she finds out why. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Also, if you love our content, don't forget to subscribe. I'll help us to stay in contact with you. The night shift at Pine Valley Hospital was usually quiet, but tonight was different. Nurse Sage Winter stood at the reception desk, her hands trembling as she filled out paperwork. The clock showed 2 a.m., and the winter storm outside rattled the windows. She looked up when she heard heavy footsteps approaching the entrance. Through the glass doors, Sage saw something that made her heart stop. A massive brown bear was walking toward the hospital on its hind legs. In its front paws, wrapped in what looked like a tattered blanket, was a tiny human baby. The bear's fur was covered in snow, and steam rose from its breath in the cold air. Sage's first instinct was to run, to hit the emergency alarm, but something in the bear's eyes made her pause. They weren't wild or aggressive. They were filled with desperation and what looked like tears. The bear reached the doors and stood there, looking directly at Sage through the glass, cradling the bundle with extraordinary gentleness. "Dr. Reed, Dr. Reed, please come quickly," Sage called out, her voice shaking. She knew she should be terrified, but her years of nursing experience told her something wasn't normal about this situation. The baby wasn't crying, and in the dim light she could see its skin had a bluish tint. Dr. Kai Reed rushed to the reception area, nearly dropping his coffee cup when he saw the bear. "What in the world?" he whispered. The bear made a soft, moaning sound, and they could hear the baby's faint whimper. Sage knew they had only moments to decide what to do. "We took an oath to help anyone in need," Sage said quietly, her hand moving toward the door release button. Dr. Reed grabbed her wrist. "Are you crazy? That's a wild animal." But Sage shook her head. "Look at its eyes, Doctor. Reed, something's wrong, really wrong, and that baby needs help now." The bear pressed its nose against the glass, leaving a foggy mark. A tear, an actual tear, rolled down its furry cheek. And that's when Sage noticed something else. Around the bear's neck was a worn leather cord with what appeared to be a small, glowing crystal pendant. Sage's hand hovered over the door release button for just a moment longer. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the howling wind outside. She thought about her own daughter at home, safe and warm in her bed. If her child was in danger, wouldn't she want someone to help, no matter how strange the circumstances? With trembling fingers, she pressed the button. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. The bear didn't charge in or make any sudden movements. Instead, it waited, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Dr. Reed had backed away, his hand clutching his phone, ready to call for help. But Sage stood her ground, though her legs felt like jelly. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than the bear. "We'll help the baby. Please, let us help." The bear moved forward slowly, its massive paws making surprisingly little noise on the hospital floor. Up close, Sage could see the bear's fur was matted with ice and blood. There were fresh cuts on its paws, as if it had traveled a great distance through rough terrain. The crystal pendant around its neck pulsed with a faint blue light that matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. As the bear drew closer, Sage could finally see the baby clearly. The infant couldn't have been more than a few days old. Its skin was dangerously pale, with a bluish tinge that made Sage's medical training kick into high gear. The blanket wrapped around the baby was actually a woman's sweater, torn and bloodied at the edges. "Dr. Reed," Sage called out, her professional tone returning. "We need to get this baby to the NICU immediately. The child is showing signs of severe hypothermia." The bear made a soft whimpering sound, and, with infinite gentleness, extended its paws toward Sage. She stepped forward, her hands shaking but determined. As she took the baby, she noticed something that made her gasp. On the infant's chest was a birthmark in the exact same shape as the crystal hanging from the bear's neck. Dr. Reed had finally found his courage and moved closer. "This is impossible," he muttered, reaching for his stethoscope. "Bears don't just... this can't..." But before he could finish his thought, a commotion erupted from the hallway behind them. 2 police officers who had been in the cafeteria came running, their hands on their weapons. The bear's eyes widened in fear, but instead of running or attacking, it did something even more extraordinary. It raised its paws in a very human gesture of surrender. "Wait!" Sage shouted at the officers. "Don't shoot! It brought us the baby. It's not dangerous." She cradled the infant closer to her chest, feeling its weak but steady heartbeat. The crystal pendant around the bear's neck began to pulse more rapidly, and the birthmark on the baby's chest started to glow with the same blue light. The bear's eyes met Sage's, and in that moment she saw something that would change her understanding of the world forever. In those deep brown eyes she saw intelligence, desperation, and something else, a mother's love. The bear opened its mouth, and what came out wasn't a growl or a roar, but words that made everyone in the room freeze in disbelief. In a voice that was rough but unmistakably human, the bear spoke. "Please, save my grandchild." The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Chen's hand dropped from his weapon, and Officer Martinez crossed herself quietly. Dr. Reed had gone pale, his coffee cup slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. But Sage didn't have time to process the impossibility of what she'd just witnessed. The baby in her arms was getting colder. "The child first," Sage said firmly, her nursing instincts taking over. "Questions later. Dr. Reed, we need to move." Her sharp tone snapped the doctor out of his shock. The bear stepped back, making a clear path to the hallway, its movements almost human-like now that they knew the truth. As they rushed toward the NICU, the bear followed at a respectful distance, its claws clicking softly on the hospital floor. Other night staff stopped and stared, frozen in disbelief, but Sage barely noticed them. Her whole world had narrowed to the tiny life in her arms and the steady pulse of the blue crystal that seemed to beat in time with the baby's heart. In the NICU, they worked quickly. The baby was a girl, no more than 3 days old. Her temperature was dangerously low at 94 degrees Fahrenheit. As they placed her in the warming unit, Sage noticed more strange markings on the infant's skin. What looked like ancient symbols spiraling down her arms, only visible when the crystal's light pulsed. The bear, the grandmother, stood in the doorway, watching every movement with intelligent eyes. Now that Sage looked more carefully, she could see the bear's face held expressions that were eerily human. Worry creased its brow, and its paws twisted together in a gesture of anxiety that reminded Sage of her own mother. "She's stabilizing," Dr. Reed announced after several tense minutes, his professional training finally overriding his shock. "Heart rate is improving, color's getting better." He turned to the bear, and, in a surreal moment that would have been comical under different circumstances, addressed her directly. "Can you tell us what happened? Where are the baby's parents?" The bear's eyes filled with tears again, and she slumped against the doorframe, leaving a smear of blood on the white paint. That's when Sage noticed how badly injured the bear actually was. Deep gashes ran across her side, partially hidden by her thick fur, and one of her back paws was badly burned. "They came in the night," the bear spoke again, her voice a pained whisper that somehow carried across the room. "The ones who hunt our kind. The ones who fear the old magic." She touched the crystal at her neck with a trembling paw. My daughter. She made me promise to protect the baby. She used the last of her power to give me this form, to help us escape. The hunters, they wouldn't look for a bear carrying a child. The bear's voice broke on the last word, and she swayed dangerously. Officer Chen, who had followed them to the NICU, quickly moved forward to support her massive frame. The crystal's light flickered, and for just a moment, Sage saw something extraordinary. The shadow of a human woman cast on the wall behind the bear, elderly but elegant, her face lined with the same worry they could see in the bear's eyes. The hunters followed us for 3 days, the bear continued, her voice growing weaker. Through the mountains, through the storm. My daughter and her husband, they stayed behind to fight, to give us time. But the baby was so cold, so hungry. I knew I had to find help, even if it meant revealing ourselves, even if it meant breaking our oldest laws. The crystal pulsed once more, bright enough to illuminate the entire room, and then went dark. The bear let out a soft gasp of pain, and before their eyes her form began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Officer Chen stepped back in alarm as the bear's massive shape started to shrink and change. The transformation was like watching ice melt in reverse, the bear's form flowing and reshaping itself until, where the massive animal had stood, there was now an elderly woman. She wore a torn dress made of what looked like hand-woven fabric, intricate patterns embroidered along its edges, matching the symbols on the baby's skin. The woman, the grandmother, collapsed forward, but Officer Martinez caught her before she hit the ground. Her silver hair fell around her face like a curtain, and the crystal pendant still hung at her throat, though it was now dark and lifeless. Blood stained her dress in the same places where the bear had been wounded. "My name is Sarah," she whispered, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "And that child is the last of our line, the last one born with the old magic in her blood." She tried to push herself up, her hands trembling with the effort. The hunters, they call themselves the Purifiers. They believe our magic is an abomination, that we're somehow less than human because we carry the ancient gifts. Sage was checking the baby's vital signs again, but she couldn't help glancing at the symbols on the infant's skin. Under the warming lights, they seemed to shift and move, like writing in a language that existed before words were invented. "The baby's temperature is rising," she reported, "but her heartbeat is irregular. It's like she's looking for something." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "The connection," she gasped. "When my daughter performed the transformation spell, she linked her life force to the baby through the crystal. It protected the child during our journey, kept her alive in the cold. But now—" She touched the dark crystal at her neck, her expression haunted. "Now I can't feel my daughter's energy anymore." Dr. Reed had been making notes in a tablet, trying to maintain some semblance of medical protocol in this impossible situation. "Are you saying this baby's survival is magically linked to her mother? That without this connection?" "She could die," Sarah finished, her voice breaking. "The magic in her blood is too strong, too raw. Without guidance, without the anchor of her mother's power, it could overwhelm her tiny body." Tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. "My daughter knew this might happen. That's why she gave me this." From a hidden pocket in her dress, Sarah pulled out a small leather pouch, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Officer Chen helped her open it, and a handful of crystal shards spilled out, each one identical to the now darkened pendant around Sarah's neck. "These are soul crystals," Sarah explained, "passed down through our family for generations. Each one carries a spark of our ancestors' magic. My daughter said, if anything happened to her, we would need them to save the baby. The infant chose that moment to cry, a weak, stuttering sound that made everyone in the room flinch. The symbols on her skin flared with a bright blue light, and medical equipment around them began to malfunction. The warming unit's temperature spiked, monitors flickered, and the overhead lights pulsed in rhythm with the baby's heartbeat. Her magic is destabilizing. Sarah tried to stand but fell back, her wounds finally overwhelming her. Please, the crystals. They need to be placed in a circle around her. 7 points, like the stars of the Pleiades. Our ancestors will help contain her power, give her a chance to survive until she's strong enough to control it herself. Dr. Reed looked at Sage, his expression torn between medical training and the impossible reality before them. This goes against every protocol we have. If something goes wrong, look at the monitors, Sage interrupted, pointing to the baby's vital signs. Her heart rate is climbing dangerously high, temperature too. We're losing her, and medicine alone isn't going to save her. She met Sarah's eyes, seeing the same desperate hope she'd recognized in the bear's gaze. Tell me what to do. Sarah's voice was getting weaker, but her eyes burned with determination. The crystals must be placed by someone with a pure heart, someone who can act out of love without fear or doubt. The ritual, it's dangerous. The power could overwhelm anyone who isn't ready to sacrifice everything to save her. The room fell silent, except for the increasingly erratic beeping of the monitors and the baby's weakening cries. The symbols on her skin were glowing brighter now, and small objects around the room had begun to float, caught in the waves of uncontrolled magic pouring from her tiny body. Officer Martinez still held his cross, muttering prayers under his breath. Dr. Reed had backed away from the warming unit, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. But Sage stepped forward, holding out her hands for the crystals. She thought of her own daughter again, of the fierce, unconditional love she felt every time she looked at her child. I'll do it, she said firmly. Tell me how. Sarah pressed the crystals into Sage's palms. They were warm to the touch, and Sage could have sworn she heard whispers coming from them. Ancient voices speaking in a language she didn't understand but somehow felt in her soul. Remember, Sarah said urgently, once you begin, you can't stop. No matter what you see, no matter what you feel, the circle must be completed. The baby's cries had turned to whimpers, and the symbols on her skin were now blazing so brightly they could barely look at her. Medical equipment sparked and smoked, and a wind that couldn't possibly exist indoors began to whirl around the room. As Sage took the first crystal and prepared to place it, Sarah grabbed her arm with surprising strength. One more thing, the grandmother whispered. The hunters, they'll have felt this much magic being released. They'll be coming. We have minutes, maybe less. As if in response to her words, they heard shouts and running footsteps in the hallway outside. The hospital's front doors had just been broken down. Sage's heart was pounding, but her hands remained steady as she held the first crystal. The baby's whimpers had grown weaker, and the symbols on her skin were now pulsing erratically, like a failing heartbeat written in light. Dr. Reed rushed to the door, peering out into the hallway. Multiple people coming up the stairs, he reported, his voice tense. They're wearing some kind of robes or uniforms, and they're armed. Officer Chen drew his weapon, positioning himself by the door. Martinez, call for backup, now. His partner was already on his radio, but static was the only response. The baby's unstable magic was interfering with electronic communications. Sarah tried to stand again, her face gray with pain and exhaustion. The first crystal goes at the crown of her head, Sarah instructed Sage, her voice growing urgent. Then work clockwise, letting your heart guide the placement. The crystals will show you where they need to be, but you must hurry. The purifiers will have brought their own magic, dark things that corrupt and destroy the old powers. Sage took a deep breath and placed the first crystal above the baby's head. The moment it touched the warming unit's pad, it began to glow with a soft, pearl-like light. The baby's crying softened slightly, and the wild magic in the room seemed to quiet for just a moment. Sage reached for the second crystal, but before she could place it, the lights in the hallway went out, plunging everything into darkness except for the glow of the symbols on the baby's skin and the single lit crystal. "They're here," Sarah whispered, and there was ancient fear in her voice. The temperature in the room plummeted, their breath suddenly visible in the air. From the hallway came a sound that made Sage's skin crawl, something between chanting and screaming, in a language that seemed to hurt her ears. "Nobody moves," Officer Chen commanded as shadows appeared in the doorway. But these weren't ordinary shadows. They writhed and twisted like living things, reaching into the room with tendrils of pure darkness. The baby began to cry again, a sound of pure distress, and the medical equipment around them sparked and died. 3 figures stepped through the doorway, pushing Officer Chen aside as if he weren't there. They wore deep crimson robes with strange symbols burned into the fabric, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Each carried a staff made of black metal that seemed to absorb what little light remained in the room. The leader raised his staff, and Sarah screamed in pain as her crystal pendant shattered completely. "The last of the shapeshifters," the hooded figure spoke, his voice like grinding metal. "How fitting that we'll end your bloodline where you sought to save it." He turned toward the baby, raising his staff higher. The abomination must be cleansed. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Officer Martinez fired his weapon, but the bullet stopped midair and turned to ash. Dr. Reed lunged for the baby, only to be thrown back against the wall by an invisible force. The purifiers began their terrible chanting again, and dark energy crackled around their staffs. But Sage didn't run. She didn't freeze. Instead, she grabbed all the remaining crystals, holding them tight enough that their edges cut into her palms. Blood welled around the stones, and the moment it touched them, they began to glow brighter than ever. She heard Sarah gasp behind her. "Blood freely given," Sarah whispered in awe. "The strongest magic of all." The lead purifier struck out with his staff, sending a bolt of dark energy straight at the baby. But Sage was already moving, her body acting on instinct she didn't know she possessed. She threw the blood-touched crystals into the air, and instead of falling, they hung suspended, spinning like stars. The dark energy hit an invisible barrier and shattered. Sage felt something awaken inside her, a power she'd never known she had. The crystals responded to her will, flying into position around the baby in a perfect circle. Each one blazed with light as it found its place, and with each crystal she heard voices, women's voices, stretching back through time, mothers and daughters and grandmothers, all singing the same song of protection and love. The baby's symbols flared in response, but now they weren't chaotic. They began to pulse in rhythm with the crystals, with Sage's heartbeat, with something deeper and older than time itself. The purifiers struck again and again, their dark magic crashing against the growing light around the baby, but they couldn't break through. Sarah's voice rose above the chaos, speaking words that seemed to come from another age. The old magic doesn't live in crystals or symbols or spells. It lives in the heart, in the choices we make to protect those we love. That's why the purifiers will never destroy it. That's why they fear it so much. The baby's eyes opened, and they were filled with the same light that surrounded her. She looked at Sage and smiled. A real smile, impossibly advanced for a newborn. And in that moment, every crystal in the circle flashed like a supernova. The light was blinding, pure and clean, and more powerful than anything the purifiers could summon. When Sage could see again, the hooded figures were gone, their staffs lying broken on the floor. The darkness had been pushed back, and the room was filled with a warm, gentle radiance. The baby was sleeping peacefully, her breathing strong and regular, the symbols on her skin now a soft, steady glow rather than a frantic blaze. But there was no time to celebrate. Sarah stumbled forward, catching herself on the warming unit. "They'll be back," she said urgently. "With more of their kind. The baby is stable now, but she needs to be taken somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't track her." She looked at Sage with desperate hope. Somewhere with someone strong enough to protect her. Someone whose heart is pure enough to help her learn to control her gifts as she grows. Sage looked down at her hands, still bleeding from the crystal cuts, then at the sleeping baby whose life she had just saved. She thought of her own daughter again, and of the empty bedroom in their house that she'd never had the courage to fill after her husband died. She thought of the loneliness of the past few years, and of the incredible events of this night, and of the choice that now lay before her. Dr. Reed cleared his throat. "Legally speaking, this is a medical facility and that child is under our care. We should contact social services, follow proper protocols." He trailed off, looking at the broken staffs on the floor, the hovering crystals, and the lingering traces of both light and shadow magic that filled the room. "But I suppose proper protocols don't really apply here, do they?" Officer Chen holstered his weapon, shaking his head in disbelief. "I didn't see anything," he said firmly. "Did you, Martinez?" His partner, still clutching his cross, shook his head quickly. "Nothing at all, just a quiet night shift." Sarah reached out and took Sage's hand, pressing something into it. A small book bound in worn leather, its pages covered in the same symbols that marked the baby's skin. "Everything you need to know is in here," she said softly. "The history, the teachings, the ways to control and channel the power. I can't go with you. I'll lead them away, make them think we fled in another direction. But you," she squeezed Sage's hand, "you've already shown you have the strength to be what she needs." The baby stirred in her sleep, and one tiny hand reached out, wrapping around Sage's finger with surprising strength. The crystal circle pulsed once more, and Sage felt that deep connection again, to the baby, to Sarah, to all the generations of strong women who had protected their legacy against those who feared what they didn't understand. She knew, in that moment, that her life would never be the same. Sarah suddenly stiffened, her head turning toward the window. Outside, in the dark winter night, red lights began to appear, dozens of them, floating in the air like malevolent fireflies. "More purifiers," she whispered. "A full hunting circle. We have minutes at most." She turned to Sage, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. "The crystals will hide the baby's magic for a short time, but you need to leave, now." Dr. Reed was already moving, grabbing supplies from the cabinets, formula, blankets, basic medical equipment. "Take the service elevator to the parking garage," he said, stuffing everything into a hospital bag. "Chen, Martinez, can you create a distraction?" The two officers shared a look, then nodded. "We'll call in a suspicious package alert," Chen said. "That'll bring every emergency vehicle in the city, in all that chaos." He gestured to Sage and the baby. Officer Martinez was already on his phone, the magic interference having faded enough for signals to return. Sarah pressed the leather book more firmly into Sage's hands. "There's a place you need to go," she said urgently. "A sanctuary, hidden in the mountains north of here. The book will show you the way, but only when you're ready to see it. Until then." She pulled a silver chain from around her neck, different from the one that had held the now shattered crystal. On it hung a small key made of what looked like mother of pearl. "This will protect you both until you reach safety." The red lights outside were growing brighter, and shadows began to creep up the hospital walls like dark ivy. The temperature was dropping again, frost forming on the windows. The baby whimpered in her sleep, and the symbols on her skin flickered anxiously. "But what about you?" Sage asked Sarah, even as she began gathering the crystals from their circle, each one still warm and pulsing with energy. "You're injured, weakened. You can't face them alone." Sarah straightened, and for a moment Sage saw the echo of the bear she had been, powerful, fierce, protective. "I've lived longer than any shapeshifter has a right to," she said with a sad smile. "And I've seen more of our people fall to the Purifier's hatred than I can bear to remember. But tonight—" She touched the baby's cheek gently. "Tonight we saved the future of our kind. My daughter did not die in vain." Sage felt tears running down her face, but she forced herself to focus on the practical matters at hand. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she typed a message to her neighbor who watched her daughter during night shifts. "Emergency at hospital. Need you to keep Emma until morning. We'll explain everything later." The response came quickly. "Of course. Emma's safe and sleeping. Take care of yourself." Dr. Reed returned with a wheelchair, standard protocol for patient discharge, though nothing about this situation was standard. "I'll update the records to show the baby was never here," he said. "As far as the hospital system is concerned, this night never happened." The shadows were halfway up the walls now, and the red lights had begun to pulse in an ugly rhythm that made everyone's heads ache. Sarah stepped back from the baby's bed, her hands raising in a complex gesture. The air around her began to shimmer. "One last gift," she said, her voice taking on an ethereal quality. "One last transformation." The shimmering air flowed from her hands, surrounding Sage and the baby like a gentle mist. "When you're in danger, when they're close, this charm will hide you both. To anyone looking, you'll appear to be nothing more than a mother with her child. Nothing remarkable, nothing magical, nothing worth noticing." The charm settled on Sage's skin like morning dew, and when she looked down at her hands, she could see that the cuts from the crystals had vanished, though she could still feel their power thrumming through her blood. The baby's glowing symbols faded from view, though Sage could still see their faint outline when she looked closely. Officer Chen poked his head back into the room. "Emergency vehicles are 3 minutes out. Whatever you're going to do it now." Sarah nodded, then turned to Sage one last time. "The book will teach you everything you need to know. But the most important lesson," she placed her hand over Sage's heart, "you already understand. Love is the oldest magic, the strongest magic. Everything else is just details." The shadows reached the ceiling, and the red lights outside had become a swirling vortex of crimson energy. Sarah's form began to change again, but this time she didn't become a bear. Instead, her body seemed to dissolve into thousands of golden butterflies, each one glowing with its own inner light. They swirled around Sage and the baby once, like a farewell caress, then streamed out the window into the night. The Purifier's chanting rose to a fever pitch, and the dark energy pursuing the butterflies left trails of black lightning in the sky. But Sarah's sacrifice had served its purpose. All attention was focused upward, away from the hospital's lower levels. "Go," Dr. Reed urged, helping Sage settle the baby in her arms. The crystals hummed in the bag at her side, and the silver key around her neck felt warm against her skin. The service elevators through those doors and to the left don't stop for anything. Sage stood for a moment, looking at the kind doctor who had chosen to help rather than hinder, the brave officers who were risking their careers to protect them. "Thank you," she whispered, "all of you." Then she was running, the baby held close to her heart, Sarah's book and the crystals bouncing in the bag at her side. Behind her, she could hear the chaos beginning, sirens, shouts, the continued chanting of the purifiers. But ahead was silence, darkness, and somewhere in the mountains to the north, a sanctuary waiting to be found. As the service elevator doors closed behind her, Sage looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. The infant's face was peaceful now, one tiny hand still gripping Sage's finger. "I'll keep you safe," Sage promised softly. "No matter what comes next, no matter what it costs." The key at her throat pulsed once, as if in acknowledgement of her vow, and she felt the last piece of Sarah's protection spell lock into place around them both. The elevator began its descent, and with each floor, Sage could feel them moving further from the magical battle above and closer to a new life she could never have imagined when her shift began. She thought of her daughter Emma, waiting safely at home, and wondered how she would explain that she was about to become a big sister to a baby with magic in her blood. But those were concerns for later. Right now, they had to survive the night. Right now, they had to escape. And somewhere above them, Sarah's golden butterflies were leading the purifiers on a chase across the winter sky, buying them the time they needed to vanish into the darkness. The service elevator creaked to a stop in the underground parking garage, its fluorescent lights flickering ominously. Sage stepped out cautiously, holding the baby close. The massive concrete space was eerily silent, except for the distant drip of water and the hum of ventilation fans. Her footsteps echoed as she moved between the rows of parked cars, Sarah's charm making them appear slightly blurred to her enhanced senses, as if she was seeing them through rain-streaked glass. The baby stirred in her arms, making a soft cooing sound. The symbols on her skin were completely invisible now, but Sage could feel the magic pulsing beneath the surface, like a heartbeat just out of sync with the infant's own. The crystals in her bag hummed in response, creating a harmony she could feel in her bones. As she approached her car, a shadow moved between the concrete pillars. Sage froze, her heart pounding. The silver key around her neck grew cold against her skin, a warning. She ducked behind a van just as two figures in crimson robes emerged from the shadows. Unlike the ones upstairs, these purifiers wore masks made of black metal, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. "The shapeshifter's trail ends here," one of them said, their voice distorted by their mask. The old witch sacrificed herself to protect something, or someone. The other purifier raised a device that looked like a compass made of smoke and bone. "The tracking spell is confused, too much interference from the hospital's pain and death." And something else. They turned slowly, the device spinning wildly. Some kind of concealment magic, old magic, strong. Sage hardly dared to breathe. The baby seemed to understand the danger, remaining perfectly still in her arms. The key grew colder, and Sage could see Sarah's charm working, a subtle distortion in the air around them, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. To the purifiers, they would look like nothing more than a shadow among shadows. But then her phone vibrated in her pocket. Her neighbor sending another message about Emma. The sound was tiny, barely audible, but in the echoing garage it might as well have been a thunderclap. The purifiers' heads snapped toward their hiding place. Sage did the only thing she could think of. She reached into the bag, grabbed one of the crystals, and threw it as far as she could in the opposite direction. The crystal hit a car several rows away, setting off its alarm in a cacophony of noise and flashing lights. The purifiers rushed toward the disturbance, their robes billowing like smoke. She seized her chance, running for her car. The key around her neck suddenly grew warm, and to her amazement her car door unlocked itself without her touching it. She slid inside, placing the baby carefully in the passenger seat. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as one of the purifiers shouted, "There! By the exit!" Sage threw the car into reverse, then drive, tires squealing on the concrete. In her rearview mirror, she saw the purifiers raising their hands, dark energy crackling between their fingers. The baby chose that moment to wake fully, letting out a cry that shattered every window in the parking garage. Glass rained down around them, but Sarah's charm protected them from the falling shards. The crystals in Sage's bag blazed with light, creating a shield of pure energy around the car just as the purifier's attack struck. Dark lightning crashed against the crystal shield, sending sparks of conflicting magic in all directions. Sage floored the accelerator, aiming for the garage exit. Behind them, she heard one of the purifiers shouting into some kind of communication device, "All units converge. The child is here." They burst out of the garage into the chaos of the emergency response. Police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances filled the street, their lights painting the night in red and blue. Officer Chen had been true to his word. The hospital was surrounded by emergency vehicles and personnel, creating the perfect cover for their escape. But as they turned onto the main road, Sage saw more red lights appearing in the sky. Not emergency vehicles, but the crimson glow of purifier magic. The golden butterflies that were Sarah had led many of them away, but not all, not enough. The baby was fully awake now, her eyes glowing with the same blue light as the crystals. The symbols on her skin flickered in and out of visibility, fighting against Sarah's concealment charm. Each pulse of magic made the car's electronics go haywire. The radio switching stations randomly, the dashboard lights flashing. Sage reached over with one hand, letting the baby grip her finger again. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Stay calm, stay hidden. We're going to be all right." She didn't know if the infant could understand her words, but the touch seemed to help. The magical disturbances settled slightly. She turned north, toward the mountains that loomed dark against the star-filled sky. Sarah's book lay heavy in her bag, and she could feel it calling to her, wanting to reveal its secrets. But first, they had to get somewhere safe. Looking in her rearview mirror again, she saw the purifiers had commandeered vehicles of their own, black cars with red headlights that cut through the night like laser beams. The silver key pulsed against her chest, and suddenly she knew what she had to do. She turned off the main road onto a smaller street, then another, following the keys warming and cooling like a magical compass. Each turn took them further from the city lights and closer to the deep forest that surrounded the northern mountains. The baby had fallen quiet again, but her eyes remained open, watching everything with an awareness that seemed impossible for a newborn. One of the crystals floated out of Sage's bag on its own, hovering over the infant like a protective star. In its light, Sage could see more details of the symbols on the baby's skin. They weren't just random patterns, but words in that ancient language, telling a story she couldn't yet read. "Your mother and grandmother gave everything to protect you," Sage said softly as she drove. "And now it's my turn. I don't know much about magic or shapeshifters or any of this, but I know about being a mother. I know about love." She thought of Emma again, of how her heart had grown so much bigger the moment her daughter was born. And Sarah was right. That's the strongest magic there is. The key grew warm again, urging her to turn onto an unpaved road that led into the forest. The purifier's black cars were still behind them, but further now, their red lights dimmed by distance and trees. As they drove deeper into the wilderness, Sage felt something changing in the air. An ancient power awakening, responding to their presence. Sarah's book suddenly opened itself in the bag, its pages glowing with the same light as the crystals. Words, in that strange language, floated up from the paper like golden smoke, swirling around them in the car. And though Sage couldn't read them, she understood their meaning. Welcome, Protector. Welcome, child of the old magic. The sanctuary calls, the path opens, the journey begins. The unpaved road twisted deeper into the forest, branches hanging low over their car like grasping fingers. The silver key grew warmer with each turn, guiding them through the darkness. Behind them, the purifier's red lights had faded to distant pinpricks, but Sage knew better than to feel relief yet. She'd seen enough tonight to know that distance alone wouldn't stop them. The baby stirred restlessly, and the floating crystal above her pulsed in response. Sage glanced over, watching in amazement as more symbols appeared on the infant's skin, not just the ones she'd seen before, but new patterns that seemed to be writing themselves across her tiny arms and face. The crystal's light revealed them to be not just symbols but tiny scenes. A bear protecting its cubs, wolves running beneath a full moon, eagles soaring over mountain peaks. Your family's history, Sage whispered, understanding dawning. The shapeshifter's story, written in your blood. The baby cooed, reaching up toward the hovering crystal with impossibly perfect coordination for a newborn. One of the crystals floated out of Sage's bag on its own, hovering over the infant like a protective star. In its light, Sage could see more details of the symbols on the baby's skin. They weren't just random patterns, but words in that ancient language, telling a story she couldn't yet read. Your mother and grandmother gave everything to protect you, Sage said softly as she drove, and now it's my turn. I don't know much about magic or shapeshifters or any of this, but I know about being a mother. I know about love. She thought of Emma again, of how her heart had grown so much bigger the moment her daughter was born. And Sarah was right. That's the strongest magic there is. The key grew warm again, urging her to turn onto an unpaved road that led into the forest. The purifier's black cars were still behind them, but further now, their red lights dimmed by distance and trees. As they drove deeper into the wilderness, Sage felt something changing in the air, an ancient power awakening, responding to their presence. Sarah's book suddenly opened itself in the bag, its pages glowing with the same light as the crystals. Words, in that strange language, floated up from the paper like golden smoke, swirling around them in the car. And though Sage couldn't read them, she understood their meaning. Welcome, Protector. Welcome, child of the old magic. The sanctuary calls. The path opens. The journey begins. The unpaved road twisted deeper into the forest, branches hanging low over their car like grasping fingers. The silver key grew warmer with each turn, guiding them through the darkness. Behind them, the purifier's red lights had faded to distant pinpricks, but Sage knew better than to feel relief yet. She'd seen enough tonight to know that distance alone wouldn't stop them. The baby stirred restlessly, and the floating crystal above her pulsed in response. Sage glanced over, watching in amazement as more symbols appeared on the infant's skin. Not just the ones she'd seen before, but new patterns that seemed to be writing themselves across her tiny arms and face. The crystal's light revealed them to be not just symbols, but tiny scenes. A bear protecting its cubs, wolves running beneath a full moon, eagles soaring over mountain peaks. Your family's history, Sage whispered, understanding dawning. "The shapeshifter's story written in your blood." The baby cooed, reaching up toward the hovering crystal with impossibly perfect coordination for a newborn. When her fingers touched it, the crystal chimed like a bell, and suddenly the car was filled with voices, echoes of conversations from long ago. "The old ways must be preserved," whispered a woman's voice, fading in and out like a badly tuned radio. "Each generation stronger than the last," said another. "When the time comes, she will know." The voices overlapped, decades or perhaps centuries of wisdom trying to make itself heard all at once. The cacophony of voices was interrupted by a flash of red light in the trees ahead. Sage slammed on the brakes just as a figure in crimson robes stepped onto the road. But this was no ordinary purifier. Their robe seemed to be made of living flames, and their mask was crafted from what looked like pure darkness. "A crimson elder," the book whispered, its pages rustling with fear. "One of the original purifiers from the first great persecution. They cannot be fought, only fled." The elder raised their hands, and the road ahead erupted in columns of red fire. The baby screamed, not in fear, but in defiance. All 6 remaining crystals burst from Sage's bag, forming a spinning ring around the car. The symbols on the baby's skin blazed so brightly that the entire forest was illuminated like daylight. In that moment of brilliant illumination, Sage saw movement in the woods, shapes shifting between the trees. Bears, wolves, eagles, and creatures she had no names for, all formed from the same golden light that had made up Sarah's butterflies. The spirits of shapeshifters passed, coming to protect their last descendant. The elder's flames met the crystal shield with a sound like a thunderclap. The impact sent shockwaves through the forest, toppling trees and creating a crater in the road. But in that same instant, the spirit animals charged. They passed through the elder's flames as if they were nothing more than illusions, their golden light tearing holes in the purifier's fiery robes. "Now," Sarah's book commanded. "While they're distracted, but be ready. The path to the sanctuary demands a price. A truth freely given, a secret willingly shared." Sage spun the wheel, driving off the road into what looked like solid forest. But the silver key flashed brilliantly and the trees parted like a curtain, revealing a hidden path that shouldn't have been possible. As they passed through, she heard the elder's scream of rage, saw the spirit animals dissolving back into golden mist, felt the crystal shield weakening. The hidden path was barely wide enough for the car, and roots kept trying to snag their wheels. The baby had gone quiet again, but her eyes were fixed on something ahead that Sage couldn't see yet. The book's pages continued to turn on their own, stopping finally on a page covered in drawings of a massive stone arch. "The gateway of truths," the book explained. "None may pass without offering a piece of their heart. The deeper the truth, the stronger the protection it buys. Choose carefully, protector. Choose wisely." Through the trees, Sage caught glimpses of stone, ancient blocks covered in the same symbols that marked the baby's skin. The path widened slightly, and suddenly they were in a clearing. The stone arch stood before them, at least 20 feet tall, its surface writhing with golden light. Beyond it, Sage could see nothing but darkness. She stopped the car, knowing instinctively that they would have to continue on foot. Behind them, she could hear the sounds of pursuit, not just the elder, but what seemed like dozens of purifiers crashing through the forest. The spirit animals had bought them time, but not much. The baby's floating crystal descended gently, landing in Sage's palm as she lifted the infant from the car. The other crystals took up defensive positions around them, their light creating a smaller but still strong protective circle. The silver key lifted off Sage's neck on its own, floating toward the arch's keyhole, one she hadn't noticed until that moment. A truth, the book prompted. A secret you've never spoken aloud. The gateway demands it, and time grows short. Sage looked down at the baby in her arms, then thought of Emma waiting at home, of all the nights she'd spent alone after her husband's death, of the walls she'd built around her heart. She thought of how quickly she'd chosen to protect this magical child, to step into a world she didn't understand. And she understood what truth the gateway wanted, the one she'd been hiding even from herself. "I've been afraid to love again," she whispered, her voice breaking. "After losing James, I was so scared of feeling that kind of pain again that I closed myself off. Even from Emma sometimes. I threw myself into work, into being practical and responsible, because it was safer than being vulnerable. But tonight..." She looked down at the baby, who was watching her with those impossibly wise eyes. "Tonight, I chose love over fear. And I'll keep choosing it every day, no matter what it costs me. Because that's what being a mother means, what being human means. To love despite the risk of loss, to protect despite the risk of pain." The gateway began to hum, its symbols glowing brighter. The key slid into the keyhole and turned on its own. Beyond the arch, the darkness began to shift, revealing glimpses of mountains, forests, and what looked like ancient buildings carved into cliff faces. But before they could step through, a wall of crimson fire erupted behind them. The Elder had found them, and they weren't alone. More purifiers emerged from the forest, their dark magic creating a cage of shadows around the clearing. The Elder stepped forward, their flame-robed form somehow even more terrifying than before. "You cannot hide the abomination forever," they said, their voice like breaking glass. "The old magic must be cleansed from this world. The natural order must be restored." The baby's symbols flared again, and to Sage's astonishment the infant spoke. Not in a baby's gurgle, but in a voice that seemed to contain multitudes, as if every shapeshifter who had ever lived was speaking through her. "The natural order is magic, and you can never destroy it, because you can never destroy love." The crystals around them began to spin faster, their light building to an impossible brightness. The gateway's hum grew to a roar, and the key in its lock began to turn again, faster and faster. Sage held the baby close, feeling Sarah's charm and her own newly awakened power wrapping around them like armor. "Run," the book commanded. "Run now, through the gateway. The sanctuary awaits, but you must choose. Now!" The Elder raised their staff, dark energy crackling around them like lightning. The other purifiers began their terrible chanting again, and Sage, holding her magical child close to her heart, made her choice. She ran toward the gateway, not away from it. The baby's crystals spun faster, creating a shield of pure light that deflected the Elder's first attack. The dark energy crashed against it, sending sparks of conflicting magic in all directions. Trees at the edge of the clearing burst into flames, their light reflecting off the barrier of shadows the purifiers had created. As Sage's foot touched the first stone of the gateway, time seemed to slow. The baby's symbols began to glow brighter than ever, but now they were changing, flowing across her skin like liquid gold. The scenes they depicted started moving, bears rearing up, wolves running, eagles soaring, all spiraling out from the baby's skin to create a sphere of living magic around them. The Elder screamed in rage and frustration. Their fiery robe exploded outward, revealing a form made entirely of crimson flames. "You cannot escape. The sanctuary's power is failing. The old ways are dying." They raised both hands, and the very air seemed to catch fire. But the baby spoke again in that voice of multitudes. The old ways cannot die as long as there is love, as long as there are those willing to protect, to nurture, to believe. The infant reached out one tiny hand toward the elder, and suddenly all 6 crystals aligned in a perfect line, pointing like spears of light. Sage felt power flowing through her, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She understood in that moment that Sarah's charm hadn't just hidden them. It had been preparing her, awakening something that had been dormant in her own blood. The truth she'd spoken to the gateway had completed the transformation. "You're wrong about the natural order," Sage found herself saying, her voice harmonizing with the baby's many-voiced speech. "Love is the most natural force in the universe, and sometimes it finds us in the most unexpected ways." She shifted the baby to her left arm, raising her right hand alongside the infant's. The key in the gateway's lock completed its final turn with a sound like a mountain shifting. The darkness beyond the arch transformed into a tunnel of swirling golden light. At the same moment, the crystals released their combined power in a single burst of pure radiance. The elder's flames were blown back, their mask of darkness cracking. Through the fissures, Sage caught a glimpse of a face consumed by centuries of hatred and fear. The other purifier's shadow barrier shattered like black glass, pieces of darkness raining down around them. "Now," Sarah's book commanded. "Through the gateway, the sanctuary's guardians can hold them back, but only if you cross the threshold." Sage ran. Behind her, she heard sounds that defied description, roaring that shook the earth, screaming that pierced the soul, magic clashing against magic in a battle that made the air itself tremble. The baby's living symbols had expanded to fill the entire clearing, becoming a dome of ancient power. As they passed through the gateway's arch, Sage felt a sensation like falling and flying at the same time. The tunnel of light seemed to go on forever and end in an instant. Images flashed past them. Generations of shapeshifters, living, loving, protecting their own. She saw Sarah as a young woman, learning to take bare form for the first time. She saw the baby's mother, fighting to her last breath to protect her child. She saw herself, in a future that might be, teaching both Emma and this magical infant about love, strength, and the power of choosing to protect. The tunnel of light began to fade, reality slowly reasserting itself around them. They were standing on a mountain path, ancient stone buildings rising out of the living rock on either side. The air was warm despite the elevation, and the sky above was filled with more stars than Sage had ever seen. The baby's symbols settled back into their normal patterns, though they still glowed softly in the starlight. The crystals, their power spent, fell gently into Sage's bag. Sarah's book floated before them, its pages turning to show detailed drawings of their surroundings. "Welcome to Haven's Heart," the book whispered. "The last great sanctuary of the shapeshifters, hidden between moments of time, protected by magics older than human memory." Sage took a step forward, then stumbled as exhaustion hit her all at once. But before she could fall, she felt strong hands supporting her. A woman stepped out of the shadows of the nearest building, her dark skin marked with symbols similar to the baby's, her eyes holding the same ancient wisdom Sage had seen in Sarah's gaze. "I am Maya, the sanctuary's keeper," she said softly. "Sarah sent word through the old paths that you were coming. We felt the battle at the gateway. You both did well." She reached out to touch the baby's forehead gently. The last child of the shifting blood and her new protector. But now you need rest, healing. Time to understand all that has changed. "My daughter," Sage managed to say, even as her vision began to blur with fatigue. "Emma, I need to—" "Is already on her way here," Maya assured her. "We sent guardians to watch over her the moment Sarah contacted us. They will bring her safely, with a story prepared for the human authorities about a family emergency requiring both of you to travel. Your path and hers were meant to cross with ours. We have seen it in the star patterns for months." The baby made a soft, happy sound, reaching for Maya with complete trust. The symbols on both their skins glowed in harmony for a moment. "She recognizes one of her own kind," Maya explained, "just as she recognized the protector's heart in you, Sage Winter, even before you knew it yourself." More figures were emerging from the sanctuary's buildings, men, women, and children of all ages, each marked with their own unique symbols. Some shifted forms as they walked, becoming animals for a few steps before returning to human form, as natural as breathing. "The sanctuary is not just a place of safety," Maya continued, leading them toward the nearest building. "It is a place of learning, of growth, of understanding the balance between all forms of life. Your daughter Emma will learn alongside the shapeshifter children, though her magic may express itself differently. And you," she smiled at Sage, "you will learn to be both nurse and healer, to understand both human medicine and magical cures. The old ways are not dying, no matter what the purifiers believe. They are evolving, adapting, finding new paths forward through hearts like yours." They entered a warm, welcoming room filled with soft light and comfortable furnishings. Through a window, Sage could see the path they'd taken continuing up the mountain, leading to what looked like a temple carved from starlight itself. The baby was already falling asleep in Maya's arms, the events of the night finally catching up with her tiny body. "Rest now," Maya said gently, placing the sleeping infant in a beautifully carved cradle. "When you wake, there will be time for questions, for learning, for understanding all that has happened and all that is yet to come. For now, know only this: you are home. Both of you are home." As Sage sank into the softest bed she'd ever felt, her last thoughts were of the incredible journey that had begun with a bear walking into her hospital. She thought of Emma, who would soon arrive to find her world expanded beyond imagination. She thought of Sarah, hoping the brave grandmother had survived her final battle with the purifiers, and she thought of the sleeping baby, the last of an ancient bloodline, who had somehow awakened magic in a simple nurse's heart. The silver key floated up from where it had fallen, gently settling on a chain around the baby's cradle. Sarah's book placed itself on a nearby shelf, its pages still faintly glowing. And above the sanctuary, the stars continued their eternal dance, weaving patterns that told stories of endings and beginnings, of magic and love, of the choices that change not just lives but the very fabric of reality itself. Sage woke to sunlight streaming through crystal windows, casting rainbow patterns across the warm wooden floors. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it all: the bear at the hospital, the magical baby, the battle at the gateway. Then she heard a sound that made her heart stop. Her daughter Emma's laugh mixed with the happy gurgling of an infant. She sat up quickly, taking in the remarkable scene before her. Emma, still in her favorite star-patterned pajamas, sat cross-legged on a colorful rug. The magical baby lay on a blanket beside her, tiny hands reaching up toward the lights Emma was creating in the air, actual spheres of soft golden radiance dancing between her fingers. "Mom!" Emma exclaimed, not stopping her magical play. "This is so cool. Maya says I've always had magic in me just like you do. We just needed to be around other magical people to wake it up." The 8-year-old's face shone with pure joy. "And is it true that this is my new sister? Maya told me how you saved her, how you fought the bad guys. You're like a superhero." The baby cooed in agreement, and symbols on her skin shifted to mirror the pattern of Emma's light spheres. Maya stood in the doorway, watching with a gentle smile. She had changed from her formal robes of the night before into simpler clothing, though the symbols on her skin still shimmered with power. "Your daughter arrived an hour ago," Maya explained. "The Guardians brought her through one of the lesser gateways, much gentler than your dramatic entrance last night. She's taken to magic as naturally as breathing." Maya's eyes crinkled with amusement. Though perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. The ability to create light is often the first magic that manifests in those meant to be guides. "Guides?" Sage asked, moving to sit beside her daughters. Both of them, she realized with a wave of emotion. In just one night, her heart had expanded to hold even more love than she'd thought possible. Maya sat with them, her movements graceful and deliberate. "There are many types of magic in the world," she explained. "The shapeshifters are but one expression of it. Guides are another, those who help others find their way to their magical gifts, who light the path for those lost in darkness." She gestured to Emma's floating lights. "Your daughter's magic manifesting this way, combined with your own awakening as a protector last night, suggests your family has a deep connection to this particular calling." The baby, and Sage realized with a start that they still didn't know her name, reached out and touched one of Emma's light spheres. Instead of popping like a bubble, it transformed into a tiny golden butterfly that flew around their heads before dissolving into sparkles. "She needs a name," Emma said seriously, creating more lights for her new sister to transform. "Something special, because she's magic, but also something normal enough that she won't get teased when she goes to school. Because she will go to school, right? Even though we live in a magic sanctuary now." Maya nodded. "Haven's heart is not separate from the world. It exists alongside it. Those who live here learn to walk in both realms, keeping the balance between magic and mundane. The children attend regular schools in the nearby town, though they also study the old ways here in the sanctuary. The town itself doesn't know we're here. They see only what appears to be a remote meditation retreat, protected by illusions and wards." The baby made another happy sound, and this time her symbols formed a clear pattern, the same stars that had been shining above the sanctuary when they arrived. "Look at that," Maya said softly. "She's showing us her true name. In the old language, that constellation is called Celeste, the celestial dancer." "Celeste," Sage repeated, and the baby turned to her with a brilliant smile. The name settled into place like the final piece of a puzzle they hadn't known they were solving. Emma clapped her hands in delight, and her light spheres exploded into a shower of gentle sparks. A bell rang somewhere in the sanctuary, its sound both musical and mysterious. Maya rose gracefully. "That's the morning gathering. There are many here who want to meet you all. Other families with children, teachers of both magical and mundane subjects, healers who can help you combine your nursing knowledge with magical curing arts." She held out her hands to help Sage and Emma up. "And I believe Sarah may have sent us a message." Sage's heart leaped. Sarah survived? But how? Maya's smile widened. The old bear is craftier than any purifier could imagine. The golden butterflies were not just a distraction. Each one carried a fragment of her consciousness. While her physical form led the hunters away, these fragments found their way here through the hidden paths. She's been slowly reforming in the Temple of Shifting Stars since dawn. They followed Maya out into the sanctuary proper, and Sage gasped at the sight. In the morning light, Haven's heart was even more beautiful than it had appeared the night before. Buildings of stone and crystal grew out of the living rock of the mountain, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solidified moonlight. Gardens full of glowing plants terraced down the mountainside, tended by people who shifted casually between human and animal forms as they worked. Children ran past them, some practicing simple spells, others transforming into cubs or pups to play chase games. Their laughter echoed off the ancient stones, mixing with the songs of birds that shimmered with impossible colors. Emma watched it all with wide-eyed wonder, her own lights unconsciously dancing around her in response to her excitement. Celeste was fully awake now, her symbols creating ever-changing patterns that reflected everything she saw. When a group of young shapeshifters ran past in wolf form, her markings became running wolves. When butterflies that looked like living stained glass floated past, her symbols transformed into delicate wings. The morning gathering is where we share news, make announcements, and welcome new arrivals, Maya explained as they walked. But first, we should visit Sarah. She'll want to see how her granddaughter has settled in, and to meet the young guide who's already helping to teach Celeste control over her magic. They climbed a path that spiraled up toward the temple Sage had seen the night before. Now she could see that it wasn't made of starlight as she'd first thought, but rather of crystals similar to the ones that had protected them during their escape. Each one thrummed with power, creating a symphony of magic that she could feel in her bones. At the temple's entrance, a familiar figure waited. Not a bear this time, but a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and eyes that held centuries of wisdom. Sarah's symbols, identical to the ones on Celeste's skin, glowed with warm welcome as they approached. "My family," Sarah said softly, opening her arms, both old and new. The symbols on her skin shifted to show scenes from the previous night, the hospital, the chase, the gateway battle. But now Sage could see them from Sarah's perspective. The golden butterflies had watched over them even as they fled, ensuring their safe passage to the sanctuary. Celeste reached for her grandmother immediately, her tiny hands grabbing at the air. When Sarah took her, their symbols synchronized, creating a spectacular light show that danced across the temple walls. Emma gasped in delight, unconsciously creating more of her light spheres that joined the display, turning the temple entrance into a cascade of magical radiance. "And you must be Emma," Sarah said warmly, kneeling down to the girl's level while still holding Celeste. "A guide already, and so young. Your light spheres are beautiful, and look how they help Celeste focus her own magic." It was true. The baby's symbols had settled into a steady, gentle glow, no longer shifting wildly with every new sight. Maya touched one of the temple's crystal walls, and it chimed softly. "The morning gathering will begin soon. But first, Sarah, perhaps you should tell them about what your butterflies discovered during the night. About the purifiers?" Sarah's expression grew serious. She led them inside the temple, where the walls were lined with crystals similar to the ones that had protected them during their escape. The morning sunlight filtered through crystal windows, creating patterns that moved across the floor like living things. In the center of the room, a pool of water reflected not their images, but scenes from around the world. Other magical communities, hidden sanctuaries, places where the old powers still thrived. "The purifiers are gathering their forces," Sarah explained, letting Emma create a floating cradle of light for Celeste to rest in. "Our battle at the gateway showed them something they feared, that the old magic isn't dying out as they believed, but finding new ways to survive, new bloodlines to flow through." She smiled at Emma's light show. New forms to take. The pool's surface rippled, showing images of crimson-robed figures converging on locations around the globe. The elder they had faced was among them, their flame robe now bearing scars of golden light from their confrontation at the gateway. "They're attacking other sanctuaries?" Sage asked, her protective instincts flaring. trying to," Maya corrected. "But our victory last night did more than just save Celeste. The way you combined human love with magical protection, a nurse's healing instinct with a mother's fierce devotion, it created something new, something that's already spreading through the hidden paths, strengthening the ancient wards in ways the purifiers never expected." Sarah waved her hand over the pool, and the scene changed to show other families. Ordinary humans discovering magical abilities after acts of love and protection, just as Sage and Emma had. The purifiers believe magic should be contained, controlled, kept pure within the old bloodlines, Sarah explained. They never understood that magic itself is like water. It finds new channels when old ones are blocked, creates new paths when ancient ones are threatened. Emma, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "Is that why my lights feel so natural? Because the magic was always there, just waiting for the right moment." She created a complex pattern of spheres that orbited around Celeste's floating cradle, making the baby laugh with joy. "Exactly," Maya said. "And that's what makes Haven's Heart different from other sanctuaries. We don't just protect the old magics, we help them evolve, grow, find new expressions through new generations." She gestured at the scenes in the pool. "What happened last night is already becoming legend in the magical world. The bear who walked into a hospital, the nurse who chose to help instead of fear, the child who brought together ancient and new forms of magic." The temple's crystals began to chime more insistently, and the sound of many voices could be heard approaching. Sarah lifted Celeste from Emma's light cradle, the baby's symbols now showing tiny versions of every person in the room. "The gathering is about to begin. Are you ready to meet your new community?" Before anyone could answer, the temple's massive doors swung open. Families began to enter. Parents and children of all ages, some fully human, some bearing magical symbols like Sarah's, some shifting between forms as easily as breathing. Among them were faces Sage recognized from the hospital, Dr. Reed and Officers Chen and Martinez, each accompanied by their own families. "You didn't think you were the only ones ready to embrace a wider world, did you?" Maya asked with a smile, seeing Sage's surprise. When real magic reveals itself, it tends to awaken similar potentials in those nearby, especially in those who choose to help rather than hinder, to protect rather than fear. The gathering arranged themselves in a circle around the pool, which now showed a perfect reflection of the star-filled sky above the sanctuary. Sarah stepped forward, still holding Celeste, whose symbols had become a brilliant tapestry of every magical form present in the room. "Welcome," Sarah began, her voice carrying easily through the temple. "We have much to discuss this morning. The old ways are changing, growing stronger by finding new paths, new hearts to call home. Last night a barrier was broken, not the barrier between magical and mundane, but the barrier of fear that has kept them separate for so long." She told the story of their night, but now Sage could see how every choice, every moment of protection and love, had created ripples through the magical world. How Emma's instant acceptance of Celeste had strengthened the baby's own powers. How Dr. Reed's decision to help had awakened healing magic in his hands. How the officer's protection had given them abilities to shield and defend. As Sarah spoke, Sage felt something stirring in the air, a power older than the sanctuary itself, responding to the gathering of so many magical beings in one place. The temple's crystals began to glow brighter, and the pool's surface became a swirling vortex of starlight. Celeste reached out toward the pool, her symbols suddenly blazing with intense light. The baby's laughter echoed through the temple, but it wasn't just her voice. It carried echoes of every shapeshifter who had ever lived, every protector who had ever sacrificed for those they loved. Emma's light spheres began to pulse in rhythm with her sister's magic, creating patterns that match the swirling stars in the pool. "The awakening," Maya whispered in awe. "It hasn't happened in over 3 centuries. Not since the first Great War with the Purifiers." She placed one hand on the nearest crystal wall, and her symbols began to glow with the same intensity as Celeste's. One by one, every magical being in the temple followed suit, their various powers creating a symphony of light and energy. Dr. Reed's newly awakened healing magic manifested as soft green light flowing from his hands. Officers Chen and Martinez generated shields of translucent energy that rippled like northern lights. Other families revealed their gifts: children who could speak with animals, parents who could weave illusions or call up elements, elders who could read the stories written in the very stones of the mountain. Sarah stepped forward, still holding Celeste, and placed her free hand in the pool of starlight. "The Ancient Ones are speaking," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. The separation between magical and mundane was never meant to be permanent. It was a shield, a temporary measure to protect both worlds until the right moment came, until hearts were ready to bridge the gap. The starlight from the pool began to rise, forming shapes in the air, scenes from the past, present, and possible futures. Sage saw the first shapeshifters learning their craft from the animals themselves. She saw the rise of the Purifiers, driven by fear of what they couldn't control. She saw the creation of the sanctuaries, meant to be shelters, but becoming inadvertent prisons, cutting magical beings off from the wider world. But then, the visions shifted to the present. The scenes showed what had happened at the hospital from a deeper perspective. How Sage's choice to help had created ripples of possibility. How Emma's immediate love for Celeste had woven new patterns in the fabric of magic itself. They saw Dr. Reed's moment of decision to help rather than hinder, the officer's choice to protect rather than persecute, all creating cracks in the ancient barrier. "The old magic and the new are merging," Sarah explained, as Celeste reached out to touch the floating scenes, making them shift and change. "The sanctuaries were never meant to hide us forever, only to preserve our knowledge until humanity was ready to remember its own magical heritage. Every human carries the potential for magic. It only needs the right key to unlock it." Emma, fascinated by the moving scenes, unconsciously created more complex light patterns. Her spheres began to tell their own stories, showing her memories of growing up with Sage, the love that had always filled their home